All right. Hello, everyone. It's good to have you. Welcome to today's webinar, Back to School Essentials. It's that time of year again, and our kids are heading back to school. And parents, this is a really hard time for all of us because our kids have to go navigate school, and we have to navigate our communications and interactions with the school and try our best to make sure our kids get the accommodations that they need. And so I'm thrilled to introduce our guest today. This is Cynthia Allman. She is the founder and co-director of the Newmark Schools. That's a K through 8 school as well as a high school that provides absolutely cutting edge services to kids with special needs. And every kid in the country should be able to go to a school like Newmark. And so I'm happy to welcome Cindy and ask you to, share a little bit about your school and the special work that you do there.
Oh, sure, Elizabeth. Thank you very much. I'm really excited to be here. It's kind of nice. I understand there might be people from all over the United States kind of tuning in, and that's really thrilling. So I am the co-founder of a state-approved private school located in Scotch Plains, New Jersey. And our first one was opened in 2001, and then we did some toiling there, and then we realized we had to open up a high school, so we opened up a high school, and off to the races we've been. But I think the hallmark about our school and why it resonates so well with people with children with special needs is because of our brand. What do we do that makes it a school that's well run and really works for kids? And what I find remarkable, honestly, about our school is that it works for a wide range of kids. And when I tell people this, they're a little surprised that, listen, it's not rocket science. It really isn't. Anybody can do this. Anybody can do what we do. You have to have a will and a real commitment to stay consistent. So the name of the game at our school is profound consistency to what we say we're going to do. And we operate on time, and we operate on organization and very predictable schedules. And it's so cutting edge, and yet it's so old school. It's what we kind of grew up with however many years ago, this idea that the adults are going to be in charge, and the kids are going to be told what to do in a fashion that is respectful, but it's going to operate very consistently on time with dignity and respect, and with a level of holding them accountability as for their academics, as well as really trying to develop their social beings and their spirit. So in our world, we hold both of those things very, very in high regard. We can't do one without the other. So we do specialize with kids who are on the spectrum, certainly all ranges of the autism spectrum, kids with all kinds of mood disorders, anxiety disorders, ODD, oppositional defiant. We have kids with all kinds of social anxiety, OCD, a wide range of student, as well as intellectual capabilities. I will tell you that our program is really designed and available to students who have a cognitive ability to access what we're talking about. But we have really set curriculum, and we have a behavior modification plan in place that's school-wide. And everything we do from scheduling, I know we talked about this, Elizabeth, a while ago. In our scheduling, the way we do things is that we look at the whole entire school year. And then we look at it by month, and then we look at it by week, and then we look at it by day, and then we look at it by hour. So that when we're looking at a student's schedule, we want to know how many transitions there are. What's the rhythm of the day? Can a student really absorb the rhythm of the day on their own? Or are they going to be so overscheduled or underscheduled, or feeling like they never have a home base? We take these things very seriously. So that's kind of our claim to fame, is that we're very, very consistent, and we really hold kids to a high standard. We can educate them to the level that they're at, as well as we understand the mental health component of what's going on for our kids.
So I think that's one area that our parents really struggle with, is those transitions, right? I mean, our kids who have mood disorders in particular are really struggle with transitions, and school is a place where there are lots of transitions all day long. They become overwhelming. They're asked to transition before they're ready. And, how do you support support those transitions that have to happen in a way that makes it effective and possible for kids who have mood disorders?
Well, I'll tell you what, Elizabeth, I'm going to talk about our school, and I know that that's not what parents are going to be receiving. So I'm going to say that respectfully. Okay, I know that they're going to walk into a school that maybe has 500 kids, 1,000 kids, 250 kids. And what I'm going to say is going to be like, well, great, that works for your school. But honestly, it will work in any school if people have the commitment to do it. So there's some very, very fundamental, easy things that any school could do. And that is give your kids a predictable day. They should know when the class period starts, and it should start on time. And it should start the same way. And the end of the period should end the same way. If any teacher does that, all the students benefit, but our kids really benefit, because for them to emotionally and psychologically and mentally shift focus, it takes a while. And I think all of us as adults can experience that at some point in time during the day when you're hyper-focused on something or you're dreading something. To really move off of what you're doing to go into something that's not going to be pleasurable is not the easiest thing to do. And we ask 7, 8-year-olds, 12-year-olds, 15-year-olds to do it like this. And in our world, the way we keep things is we minimize the amount of interactions and the number of teachers they're going to have through the K-8. They really are not, they're in self-contained classrooms really until around 4th grade. 5th grade, they're only going to have one other teacher that's academically based, meaning like science and math. We'll have a science and math teacher, and then we'll have an English and a social studies teacher, and that teacher is also, let's say, the homeroom teacher. So they're not dealing with all these different personalities. And we block the schedule so that it's consistent every day. So on Mondays, you're going to have math at 9 o'clock, it's math at 9 o'clock. Tuesdays, you have art at 9 o'clock, it's going to be Tuesdays at art. And we keep the schedule so that helps kids transition because they know what to expect. And then it becomes automatic pilot as opposed to, oh, what do I have now? Which is really a life-changing thing, as well as we warn kids that it's going to be time to change. And we give them enough processing time to make the adjustment in their head so that they can do that. And then at the high school level, obviously it's a little different because we do have subject area certified teachers. So they do have to move, but we try to block it. So it's block schedule. It's not like they're jumping every 35 minutes to a new period. So it might be 70 minutes. And we try to keep the schedule very much the same. And so that's kind of how we've been working with it.
You know, I hear you talking a lot about consistency, which unfortunately in most schools isn't always there. And then when that's combined with sort of a discipline approach to behavior issues rather than a therapeutic approach, it becomes more difficult to maintain that consistency over time for our kids. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you handle discipline at Newmark, because I'll tell you, before I knew about Newmark, I had only experienced one version of the discipline at school, and it was incredibly destructive and damaging for my child and for anyone with a mood disorder. And I think that your approach is really quite effective and respectful. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you manage that behavior as a symptom.
Sure. Well, first off, our teachers are highly trained in mental health. And we do training every year. And believe it or not, this is our 20th year. And I'm going to say most of our staff have been with us since day one. Okay. And even year 20, we still go over the procedures as if nobody ever heard them. Okay. So that's the first thing. So everybody knows what the plan is. So if we have a student, so the name of the game is in a classroom situation, what we want is our students to stay in the classroom, but not at the cost of A, the other students not being able to learn, and B, certainly not at the effect of them having this, creating an image of themselves where nobody is going to want to be with them anymore. We see that as a need for an intervention, not necessarily punishment. So the way we look at it is we're really trying to understand the mental health component of the child and what is it that they need. And honestly, their behaviors, they're communicating something. They are trying to communicate something. It's coming out sideways and not always the most pleasant, but they're trying to tell us they have a need for something other. Now, in our school, education is king, and they have to be held to a standard. You cannot roll with our kids if you start to bend your rules and change this to accommodate that and change that just because that kid's having a bad moment and therefore, well, we're going to let it go. That is the worst thing that can happen to a school, because in my belief is that you need to have a place to come back to, especially kids who have mood disorders, right? They're going to go in and out. And if there's no place to come back to center where everything has stayed the same and solid grounds, then what happens is our kids roll even more and they continue to roll. And that's when you see behavior starting to become very destructive and very cyclical, and they start to spiral. But if you have a place that is firm and the boundaries are very clear on what a child can and cannot do, what will happen is the child will come back to ground and get grounded and feel better and can perform again. And then they might hit a rolling point and we'll roll with them, but then there's always a ground, and then they can go from there. They could go months without having that because there's a place to land. And the way we do that is we do have a point system. I don't know if anybody cares to know about that, but we do have a behavior modification system. What makes us unique is the whole entire school uses the same common language and the same point system. And because of that, there's tremendous consistency. And what I think kids really appreciate, there seems to be a sense of fairness. Well, he didn't earn his points because he was interrupting, and I didn't earn my points because I was interrupting. Okay, fair. But it seems that our kids, when they're in an environment that doesn't appreciate who they are, they always seem to be getting it in the neck, and they feel like they're always the one in trouble. So if I have a student who's really acting out in a classroom environment, let's say, or in the gym or in the cafeteria, and I believe that it's going to cause them harm in terms of their social well-being, because they might be really angry and kind of being nasty, it's not a good look for them at that moment. I want to take that kid offline, give them an opportunity to cool down and say, hey, what's really going on? What are you really mad about? This seems like, is this a big deal or a little deal? And we have all these languages in which they're immersed in to really be able to articulate what's going on. We look for solutions. They know we're solution driven. And they trust that. And that's the biggest thing. Kids have to trust that you're a listener they can believe in. I can't tell you how many times kids go to school and they do tell somebody that something's not right and they're blown off. Oh, just get back out there. Let it be. Let it go. It's no big deal. But to that kid, it's a big deal. And if you don't take it seriously and honor that and really find out why it's so upsetting to them, and you'll miss an opportunity to change a life. And I think that's important for educators to really understand. And I'll even give you a little example. This is like one of these moments. Just at the end of our ESY, we had a student who was in the classroom watching. We had the opportunity to watch a movie. And it was a part in the movie. The kid was so angry and so upset that he had to get out of the classroom. And I had a few staff members stood like around him saying, like, how far is this kid going to go? Because he's so upset. And we're trying to have a conversation with him. And the bottom line is this kid who was huffing and puffing, crying, wanting to run out, wanting to get away, angry at everybody, was genuinely upset that the kids laughed at a part in the movie that he felt was really cruel. It was cruel because, like, I don't know, I forget what it was. It was something like the animals weren't getting to see their mother or something like that, or left out. And he's like, how could they laugh at that? And I could identify with that. And I felt bad because I've been in that situation where I was left out. Now, anybody else who doesn't go the extra mile, ask 6, 7, 8 more questions, will lose that. And that's a big aha for an educator to realize that kid is acting out and doing that because they're in pain. And they want to be out of pain. And there is a quick way to get that kid out of pain. And it was just simply as, Jason, honey, can I give you a couple of alternative options of what could have went on? Yes. Well, Jason, these kids may not be as mature as you and didn't see it the way you did. or maybe they were embarrassed about their feelings and they didn't want other kids to see them be so vulnerable. Oh, that could be. So he went from being this kid who was acting out and troubled and gonna be in trouble to a kid who got an A+ from the director of the school because they handled it by being able to communicate. These are the things that will really make a difference, is when people are trained to do that.
And there's another piece of it, which you sort of hinted at, which is what happens when they go back to that grounded setting? What happens when they go back to their classroom after they've been removed from the class and had the opportunity to go through that processing? What happens when they go back to that classroom?
Right. And you know what, I think that it's absolutely critical that they be welcomed with open arms in a way that dignifies their challenge. You don't want to make a big deal out of it, but I've seen this all the time. A kid could come back in to a classroom and the teacher doesn't even acknowledge that they're there because they're uncomfortable. They don't know what to say. They're afraid of the big blow up, or they're afraid they're not going to handle it. And then their whole classroom is going to slide off and the math lesson is ruined. But if you have people knowing what to do when the child comes back in, it's easy, right? And we train them for that moment. One of the trainings, like the analogies that we use here, is that Newmark is kind of like a big conveyor belt. Think of Amazon. That Amazon has all these different conveyor belts. Well, we do too. And everything's moving to get to the end of the day, and we're moving all these packages, all these kids. But the thing about Amazon, if something goes wrong with one of those packages, they can take it offline, fix it, put it back online, and continue the day. That's a big important piece, is that consistency part where everybody knows what's coming next, so nobody is panicked to have to make decisions in the moment about what do I do. And that's generally what happens to teachers, is that there's not a very broad picture of what to do when a child has an outburst. They basically close the door and say, do the best you can. And that's not what happens here.
Well, and in my experience, in a lot of school environments, when the kid comes back to the classroom, there's a punitive response. The child has to apologize to the teacher. The child has to apologize to the class. The child has to, in a sense, be humiliated again about what happened in front of everyone in order to be accepted back. And that is absolutely not the way you advise that it be handled.
No, absolutely not. And you know what? I would never make a kid say they're sorry when they're not. That's a false sense of life, right? That really is undermining a human being's dignity. Making somebody apologize. I mean, I might say, hey, what are some of the things you may want to do? You're really super disrespectful to Mrs. O. You do realize that she's a mother. She's going to go home at the end of the day and her kids are going to say, hey, Mom, how's your day? And what is she going to say? Who do you want to be in that conversation? And then,
so you're really talking about promoting and encouraging empathy on both sides, both from the student to the teacher and from the teacher to the student.
Yeah. And you know what, again, is this rocket science? I don't think so. I think it's about really understanding humanity and dignifying it. It's as simple as that. And I know, as somebody wrote in the chat, can you give me an example of how a teacher might welcome a student back in? One is, it may be, hey, Johnny, you ready to be here? I'm so glad. I understand you did really well. Come on. And you have to realize that there's always going to be a person who walks the student back to class and puts them back in the classroom, says to the teacher, hey, I want to let you know, Johnny's fine. He did an awesome job. So he's coming back feeling, we won't let a kid go back into the classroom until we feel that they're really ready to be that person. And then, and the other thing is, the work that they missed, they're not going to be held accountable for homework or do it at recess time. Whatever you've missed for that. You start where you left off, not on page, because everybody moved on to page 70 and you were in trouble from page 67 to 70. Therefore, you do that for homework, which is double jeopardy for our kids. So, as you get ready to go back, I would say, if you're looking at your kids going into school, The only thing you can really, if you can't change the school, okay, what you want to tell your kids is, listen, honey, I know that sometimes adults don't always do the right thing. I think they mean well. They want to do the right thing, but it doesn't give you the right to act like a jerk to them. And we can talk about it later when you get home. So, you know, you can't prevent a kid from not having a bad moment with a teacher. It can happen anywhere, anytime. So the goal is not to say, well, that teacher's a jerk, they shouldn't do that. Or I'm going to go up to the school and I'm going to make sure that teacher never does that again, because there'll be another teacher. There'll be a postman, there'll be a nurse, there'll be somebody in their lives that won't do the right thing based on who they are.
Mm-hmm.
The trick is to really start to educate them. Yeah, people do dumb things. People aren't always right, but who are you in the matter of it? How can you be kind? How do you hold yourself? And that is the only thing you can do. And I'll give you an inside tip, parents. We say that to our kids about you. Okay, so that's how I know it works. Because sometimes I'll have kids who will say, my mom is so hard on me. My mom is such a jerk, or my dad does this, or yeah, my brother is this and that. And it's like, I can't affect that. There's no change there I'm going to make. It's not even in my wheelhouse. It's not, and who knows what's true? I have no idea what's accurate, right? In a moment, anybody can say anything. So what we say to them is, well, honey, who are you going to be in the face of that? Did you ever consider and give them alternative perspectives? Not one's right, but if it is, who are you going to be and where's the love for that? And generally kids want to be in a better space. They want to find love. They want to find kindness. They don't want to be angry.
So I want to double back to a question that was asked earlier, which was about how do you manage with your child who has a mood disorder when the interventions that the school is sort of versed in and prepared to give are like all ABA interventions that may or may not be applicable to your child? What do you recommend parents do in circumstances like that?
Well, I've given that some thought because I know we chatted a little bit about that. And I guess where I'm always thrown to really, I've been in IEP meetings where I am stunned. I am personally stunned by sometimes the school district has no idea. They are really just doing paper. The person who's sitting across, who's your case manager, is just doing paperwork because they really don't know. They could have been a teacher and then suddenly got this because they got promoted or they want to change jobs, whatever the case may be. I'd be more inclined to say, how do you think ABA is going to help my child? What is it about it that you think it's warranted? Where is the research that shows that? And you will get dead air. Because if your child is honestly not on the spectrum and over the age of 7 or 8 and not seriously impacted with autism, I can't imagine true ABA being worth any value. It's not. I mean, we have what we would consider a modified ABA approach in that you get a reward system, but it's every 30 minutes and it has high contingencies and it's not as rote. And we don't take the data because we don't think the data is necessary for the population I'm referring to. But you might have a little bit more of an ABA type approach for maybe in the home if your child's out of control. Or you might need a therapist in the home to really break it down to the very basics. But generally speaking, for at least the students at Newmark and for 90% of the population or higher, you're not going to use ABA for a child who's older. And what I would recommend is saying, how does that work? And where's the research that shows that works with a child with?
That sounds like that might be applicable to almost any type of intervention or accommodation that a school personnel wants to put into an IEP, is to be able to say back to them, okay, explain to me how that will help my child. Because I think in a lot of the IEP meetings I've been in, people sort of get lost in the language of, 3 out of 5 times that they attempt, they'll have this outcome. But without a lot of discussion is, how is this going to help my child achieve the overall outcome that we want for him or her to, achieve over the course of a school year. And so it may feel confrontational to have to put that back on them and say, explain to me how that will help. But done properly, it sounds like that could really be a way to gently direct the way it goes.
They'll go, oh, wait a minute. Maybe that really isn't a good approach, because they just kind of go, okay, kid with IEP, they get an aid check. They're going to be in the self-contained check. They're going to get counseling check. They're only going to get speech, not for anything other than articulation, because they can't say their F's or THs. And they're missing so many other things because they're just doing based on what they know. And I'll give you an example of this. This was shocking. I did a presentation down at Atlantic City for all this, for the state conference, right, the teachers conference. And I had a director of special services in my session who had been in the business probably for about 50 years. And when I told him what we did and how we did it, he said, wow, I can't believe that. What? We are giving people, we're doing the same kind of training that we're using the same model that we used for kids in preschool handicap for everybody moving forward. It's based on the preschool handicap program. They have not changed their structures or their systems to accommodate anybody else for that matter. And that seems to be part of the problem. So I think the big thing to ask yourself is, when you're really dealing with the school district, is I get parents who call me all the time and ask me, how do I get kids into your school, and what should I tell my school district? And I want them out of the district, or I want them in a different district, or I want them in a different class, or I want two things that I'm going to warn parents about is be really careful what you're asking for, because sometimes if you're really not educated and up on it, you could be asking for the absolute opposite thing that is going to be good for your kid. And I'll give you an example. I opened up a couple of classrooms in one of our school districts. And instantly, what I wanted to do is I wanted to take some kids and put them into what we call a self-contained classroom. Why? Because it was small, it was consistent. It's going to be the most consistent place this kid's going to be. Fewer personalities to get lost in the sauce with, fewer, you're not going to get miscommunications. A cohort of kids that they'll see every single day, consistency, get the rhythm, lay of the land, have them start to feel and get their sea legs. I wanted them in that environment, and it models our school. Well, the school district was really on board. Yes, we're going to do that. We're going to do that. And then it was the parents who said, oh no, they have to be in a regular ed classroom, and the kid is only in second grade. And the school district acquiesced to something that was diametrically opposed to the whole program that was going to benefit this kid. So I know that sometimes school district people can be like Darth Vader. It can feel like that. But sometimes if you're sharp about it and you delve a little deeper as a parent and ask why, how come, how do you as an educator see that benefit in them, that might sway you one way or the other. You might say, oh, that's not what I think my kid needs. Or you might say, oh, that is what my kid needs. So you really have to get up under the hood and ask for their philosophy. Where's the research? Have you had success with that before? How do you know it's been successful? Those kinds of questions. Because sometimes they have an inside scoop. It may not even be the right answer, but for the environment, it might be the right answer, because they know that we want to put them in this classroom because the crush of kids coming down the hallway will just annihilate your kid with fear. And I want them in that classroom because they're not going to have to deal with that. They have those reasons, but they don't articulate it.
So how would you advise parents to prepare for these meetings? You and I have talked about the fact that, some parents come in with a lot of ideas. They think they know what they want for their kid. And then, they get there and they're not heard. They don't feel listened to. They don't feel as though their input is being put into the plan that's being developed. So how, as a parent, do you go into those meetings sort of best equipped and best able to communicate effectively with people who you may wind up having you may have had some adversarial interactions with.
Sure. I think, honestly, I think the first thing to do is really know your parental rights, know the law. And if you don't know the law and it's over your head, understandable. And you're ready for this? Even the world of education can be over your head, and that's not an insult. There's a lot of acronyms and things that education has changed. Feel free to go in with somebody who could support you. Okay, have a person who can, help digest. It's like that. You don't go to a doctor necessarily by yourself anymore because it's all so fast and you want to be able to catch everything. So I would definitely really read up on your rights, know what the law says, because I have people who are arguing for stuff that's not even in the law, and the district immediately goes, okay, we're not going to do it because they don't even know what they're asking for. So know the law, come prepared. Okay, just to do that. The next thing is that I would really advise you not to be so emotional, and this is the hard part. Mm-hmm. If you go in and say, my son's not thriving, he's so smart and likable, and you should see him at home. He's just the life of the party at home, and at dinner time, he's charming, but he doesn't have a friend at lunchtime, and it breaks my heart. They go like this, well, what do you want me to do about that, lady? I can't make him have friends. All right. But if you're able to say, my son has 120 IQ. He's very, very bright, but he's not successfully achieving a grade level that is commensurate with his academic abilities. And you have him in a classroom. Last year, he was in a classroom that was, he didn't have peers, academic peers. He didn't. And then socially, he's not able to connect because of his mood disorder or his autism, or mood disorder and autism, right? Where socially he has such deficits that I'm concerned about his functioning as an adult. I don't know if he's going to be able to achieve the skills necessary to actually access the curriculum that you're offering. So the point is, you have to look at it, you have to speak in their world, not this emotional world, because it won't sway them. I mean, would it sway you if somebody was buying your house and they said, but I really love your house. It's so nice. Why don't you just sell it to me for what it is? Why don't you give it to me for the price I want? You'd be like, no, lady, I'm selling my house, right? The point is that the less emotional and factual you can be, the less drama that goes into it for the people to weed out what's so. And when you just get really factual, they tend to really listen.
It sounds like you're talking about really being able to go into the meeting, knowing what your goal is, not in terms of the outcome that you want to see, but in terms of what type of relationship you want to develop with the people that you're working with. You want to have your facts clear about your rights. You want to have the ability to ask them calmly to justify and explain the interventions and the accommodations they're proposing, and that you want to be able to try to stay as unemotional as possible so that you can interact with them really as peers rather than having a power dynamic of school professional and parent.
Right, and absolutely. And I think the other thing to realize too, that I've seen it both ways. I've seen parents acquiesce, smile and grin, and just try to get out of there alive. They don't really advocate for their children. Okay, whatever you say goes. I don't know anything about education, so whatever you say goes, and I don't think that's a good thing. But you may not know as a parent what your child needs. You may not know, because how would you? You may not know what to ask for. So what you may know, probably more than anybody, is where it's not working, right? You'll see the crying at night for the homework. You'll see I'm not getting on the bus in the morning. You'll see I hate school, I'm not going. You'll get the phone call to come pick them up. You'll get the fight or the report card, or no birthday invitations, or no welcoming from the parents. You'll know that. So I would go and be more inclined to say, okay, here's the problem that I'm seeing. I have a child who struggles to do homework because they can't remember, and I need some assistance so that when he gets home, I can support him in his homework. But what's the mechanism you have in place to help parents when the child forgets, right? I'm finding that my son really never gets invited to birthday parties. I don't think he's making any friends at school. He's doing something to alienate those kids. And it's either he doesn't understand the language of boy world, he's not picking up on the social cues, he is nonstop talk at everybody and a bore. What can we do at the school to help facilitate any kind of growth in that area?
So that seems like a key, like to be identifying a problem as you see it and asking for support to solve that problem, and asking what mechanisms do you have as a school to give him what he needs in order to solve this problem.
Right. And I'll give you an example though. And then so here's what you're going to do. You're going to run into some things that are just not going to jive with you because they don't have a really good mechanism. Okay. So let's say your kid has colitis and at any given moment they need to use the bathroom, and it could be embarrassing for, let's say, a 13-year-old boy. It could be very embarrassing. And they say, oh, no worries. They can go to the nurse's office. The nurse's office is a 2x4 room, and everybody's always packed in there. It could be embarrassing to be in the bathroom, but they'll say to you, no, that's where they go. They go to the nurse's office. They go to the nurse's office. Those are the things that you're going to lose your mind over when you find that they're going to be a broken record about what they do, like it works, when everybody knows it doesn't. So you'll have to be prepared to say, okay, so I'm just thinking that might be a little uncomfortable for my son. Is there an alternative that we can come up with? If he has to use the restroom, is there a way that he can use a bathroom that's a little more private? Could he do this? Could he do that? And you have to be sensitive to that. It's not, Burger King. You can't have everything your own way. They have a script that they have to get through. They really do. And I find that I have child study team members who will call me up and say, Cindy, we've tried everything to keep this kid in our school. Clearly, we can't do it. The parents are lovely. You're going to love these parents. That's when I know that parent is really sharp and has been able to navigate the nonsense, because there will be nonsense that you can't believe. They can't give you an extra set of textbooks at home. Is that really all that hard? They can't, refrain from calling your kid lazy. There's going to be things that you're going to lose your mind over, and rightfully so. But I would strongly suggest that at the beginning of any relationship, be more inclined to ask how they plan on doing it. How do they see that working? Have they had success with that before? And then offering, if you believe that there's some other way that might be more beneficial, approach it as, well, is it a possibility I would like to see, maybe, would this work? And that's not to kowtow. That's really not that. I don't believe in kowtowing to anything. That's really just to be collaborative and non-threatening so that people can listen.
So that brings up something that I know our community struggles with a lot, especially with mood disorders for kids, is that we as parents wind up having to do a lot of the education for the school staff, the teachers, the administrators, the people who are coming in contact with our children every day. We have to tell them what works sometimes and why. And so there's a little bit of a role reversal there. And so, what are some accommodations that generally are beneficial for kids with mood disorders, so that when we as a parent go into that meeting, we have something in our toolbox to say, well, maybe is it possible that we could do this instead?
Sure. I think the biggest thing for kids with mood disorders is to recognize that they potentially really might need to use the restroom and might be physically very thirsty. Critical components, because a lot of our kids are on meds. They may not be hungry at the time of lunch, but they can be ravenous as soon as their meds wear off and it's time. So can we have snacks when they're hungry, as long as it's not a game, okay? Because kids can sometimes play games. So being able to take care of their physical needs that way. Temperature. I think is very important. Really pay attention to a kid who gets really overheated and cool them down. Noise. When a kid tells you, I can't function because of the noise, pay attention to that. Because there's nothing worse for a kid with a mood disorder than to have an annoying, everything's grating on your nerves to begin with, and it's 9:05. And now you have the kid next to you breathing through a nose that is totally stuffed for the entire year and whistling. Drives a kid crazy, or a kid who clicks his pen, or a teacher who pops her peas in your face, or whatever it is. That is the thing that can tip a kid over. And truth be told, if we were to round up all our administrators and put them on a plane and lock them in and say, we're going to sit on the tarmac for 8 hours, I can guarantee you everybody getting off that plane would look like a bipolar kid. All right. We'd be irate. We'd be annoyed. It's hot. It's this. Sensory really matters to our kids. We got to pay attention to that. We got to recognize that they're tired. Their chances are they're going to be very tired at different times. They're going to be very high at other times and very low at other times. I'm personally all for giving them the 15-minute power nap if they really need it. The kid's head's down on the desk, they can't stay awake, and the teacher keeps yelling at them, stop. Give that kid, so here's what we're going to do for you, sugar. I'm going to take you to the nurse. We're going to give you a power nap. 15. They are so grateful that somebody has recognized their struggle, that they power on because they feel supported. I think that's a big accommodation. Can you give him a power nap for 10, 15 minutes if he really just needs to close his eyes? I think in terms of academics, what's really important there is they could use the notes because they're going to forget. Very often their executive functioning gets impacted by the medication. So give them extra time on things. Try not to pressure them if you don't have to. Don't give too many assignments at once. Chunk everything into bite-sized pieces. And then, they might need more quiet time. You know what I mean? So after lunch, if they really are hyper aroused, they might need 10 minutes in the library before they come back into class to calm down and read a book. These are just some of the general accommodations. And certainly, giving them explain things. A lot of times these kids need to have things explained to them why. And less verbal command, if you can avoid that. So instead of going through the instructions verbally, sometimes our kids will do better by handing them the directions. All right, and try to minimize the amount of times you have to correct them. Not that you don't correct them, but you do it not necessarily over verbally. And why I say that is because, like anybody else, drive home in traffic. Okay, it's hot, traffic, you're hungry. And when you get home, you're so happy that you're going to get to unload the dishwasher. You're going to be able to unpack your groceries, start to make dinner, throw a lot of water. Oh, and the dog threw up. That's what you're looking forward to when you go home after a long day's work. Picture being 9 and feeling the same way. And now somebody's going to correct you yet again. So the idea is to minimize the amount of instruction because it becomes more routine than it becomes instructional. So for example, give them, if you have to remind them of something to raise his hand, don't keep telling him to raise his hand. Give him a note, put it on his desk and point to the note to remind him that way. To remind him of his schedule, don't tell him what his schedule is. Say, John, I want you to look over here. Because the less chatting at you, the better off the kids are. Does that make sense?
It does, and it actually reminds me of some of the accommodations that we used to have to ask for our child. Allowing him to have water on his desk that he can drink when he gets thirsty, allowing him to be able to go to the bathroom when he asks to. Having the homework broken down. So there are certain things that have to be done, certain things that are required, certain things that are optional, certain things that are a bonus if he does them, so that the homework is not as overwhelming. And being given positive instruction. So instead of feeling as though he's being criticized through redirection, that the redirection instead is an encouragement, And I remember feeling very frustrated that those things needed to be put into an IEP, because why wasn't that just how it is? But sometimes they do have to be put down on paper, because there isn't a guarantee that everyone who comes in contact with the child throughout the day is going to be able to do those things consistently. And while you may have a great homeroom teacher, the computer teacher or the PE teacher might not be as great and might not have, the same empathetic impulses. And having it laid out provides a roadmap for everyone.
And I want to be straight with you. It doesn't guarantee that they're going to do it, right? And
Right.
IEPs are loaded with stuff that everybody has good intentions that can't be done. So my advice to parents is, if you get yourself nutty over putting everything in the IEP, the only thing you're going to do is frustrate the district and make yourself upset that it's not getting done. You have to think to yourself, realistically, what is the benefit of this being in the IEP? So for example, being able to have teachers give praise more often than, for every time you criticize, you redirect a kid, you have to give 4 positives. We would call that a no-brainer in our school, right? But if you put that in an IEP and you want it across the board, I can promise you no school is going to every single classroom checking on that. They won't. They'll say it once and it'll be up to the teacher to do it, right? But what it will be helpful for is that when you have a problem in the computer class, in the gym class, in the art room, or in the math class, you can say it's in the IEP. Are they doing that? Can we give that teacher a refresher? Is there a chance that they can be trained a little bit more on that? Now, who wants to do that? That's like busman's holiday for you guys, right? You do it at home and now you have to do it at school. Unfortunately, that's just the way it is. So I would really pick and choose what you're willing to work on. Because if you throw a whole bunch of stuff out there and it's not happening, you're going to find yourself having an aneurysm because none of it's being done to your standard. Be mindful that you could be asking for the kitchen sink that's never going to be, and they'll just yes you to death. Sure, you want that? You want that? Oh yeah, we can do that. And then it's not done to the degree that you want it to be done, and you're frustrated and angry. So I try to make those things as realistic as possible.
It sounds almost like you're saying that before you go into that meeting, you really have to have narrowed down what the most important, most salient pieces are for your child, and focus on those, and maybe let some of the things that are further down on the list of priorities go.
I would kind of do that, because then, if you're going and arguing over every little thing, they just think that you're a parent who can't be satisfied. Right. And I would go into the IEP open-minded, because they might tell you something about your kid you don't know. He doesn't do it at home. You don't know. And then suddenly what you're arguing for to work on is really not the critical piece that's causing all the other stuff. So if you have a kid in school, let's say you think that they're not getting their academic piece done and they should be giving you more homework or this or that or better quality reading and this, that, next thing. And the teacher says to you, your kid can't look up at the board because he's counting on his fingers because he has OCD so badly, but you don't see it at home. Be open-minded, listen, and make intelligent choices. That's what I would recommend. And really ferret out, what is it that you want for your child in that regard? What's going to move the ball forward? And hear what they have to say. And they should hear what you have to say. But if you're that way, they tend to listen, I think, a little bit more.
Now, you at Newmark have this consistency, and you have this, the point system, and you have the DI room for when a kid is overwhelmed and needs to take a break. You have all of these systems in place that are consistently applied. But for those parents whose kids are in the public school and won't have that consistently across the board, what are things that you think are sort of most essential to try to recreate for our children with mood disorders?
I think minimizing the amount of people that you have to negotiate with, if that's possible. So if your teacher, if you can minimize the amount of movement, ideally, right? But what's tough about that is that you could have a gifted child who could be an AP everything. And you don't want them in a self-contained class in high school because they're not going to access the academics. I understand that. I think I would probably look to really seek out specialized teachers then. You might have to go that route. You might have to say, okay, of your staff members, who is the one who's most sympathetic in this world, in this universe? Can we select the teachers that are a little bit more forgiving, who understand executive functioning, have training in mood disorders, have training in how they manifest, have de-escalation skills? Who do you have on your staff that my child could be in their class? I would try that. I would also try to ask them, always have a backup. I think any kid who has a mood disorder should have counseling in their IEP, should have counseling and a go-to person in the morning. I really like to see that our kids get connected with the counselor first thing in the morning, not for a half hour, not for chatty Cathy and coffee, but one person, two people. They always have to have a backup. You maybe have 2 or 3 people who are always going to be there first thing in the morning to check in with that kid. And it doesn't have to be like, let's go into my office and find out how you're feeling. It's really to do triage in the morning and to check in. And I like having the person go to your child as opposed to your child going to them. And I say that because they get trained on how to escape when they do that. It's different when Mrs. Smith sees you coming in off the bus because she knows that she's going to watch you. She wants to see who's coming in. And think about it. It's a 3-minute commitment to watch you get off the bus, to make sure you're just standing in the same spot every day. Hey, Michael, how you doing? So good to see you. Oh, look at those, some new snakes. How you feel? And then when he comes in all grumpy, not to have some nitwit saying to him, oh, come on, smile. It's a beautiful day. Right?
Yes, you can't tap dance a kid with a mood disorder out of his mood.
No, what you want to do is acknowledge that honey bunny for coming in and just saying, rough start. Okay, you're really having a hard time. All I know is I'm going to say you are one rock star for even coming in. Way to go, my man. And it has to be that. Because sometimes that's the only voice that will out-talk their negativity, that's putting them down and saying how awful everything is. Ideally, I'd like to have go-to people who don't necessarily, the kid has to go to them, but that teacher will show up consistently every day at that time. That's a guidepost. At lunchtime, there's somebody there that is going to be looking out for that child and making sure they make a connection. It's a 1-minute job.
And you're really talking about they're recognizing the mood, acknowledging the mood, and validating the child for the experience of the mood and for being able to overcome.
Right. Yep. And I see kids who will leave the classroom and they walk into the bathroom and you can just see the mood all over them. And there is no reason. There's no reason, and they know it. So there's no point in a big chatty Cathy with them. The only thing is to say, all right, hey, Ben, all right, you okay, hon? I can see you look like you're having a tough moment right now. Not day, moment. You're having a tough moment. You all right? All right, babe. I'm pulling for you, honey. I really can see it. I'm just pulling for you. And that's it. Not a big, let's have a therapy for 30 minutes. And that's where parents go wrong too. They want to have it in the IEP that they 30 minutes, 3 times a week. And you hamstrung a teacher, a school by doing that because they follow the IEP, when in essence, they don't need it 30 minutes. What they need is guideposts throughout the day, touch-ins that are consistent. That's more powerful than having 30 minutes once a week, if that makes sense.
And it does, it absolutely does. And these are things that I know that we advocate for when we work with families in their educational needs, is being able to say the child has to have someone who is their safe, trusted adult at the school, and there needs to be a backup. So when that trusted adult is sick or on vacation or in a meeting, that there's someone else who can come in, not because they're going to have to, you know, de-escalate a major problem, or because they're going to have to, you know, turn the kids the whole day around, but just so that child feels validated, acknowledged,
Yeah.
and that there's, especially for kids with fear of harm, that they have that safe person who's there, and that acknowledgement and that sort of just feeling that person's presence can provide a lot of, you know, vicarious support.
Now, there's a whole other section that everybody wants an aid. Now, the question is, you know, oh, like that's an ABA leftover. That's an early intervention leftover that everybody gets an aid. If we had really thought about it 20 years ago, if we structured our school differently, would everybody need an aid? I don't know, right? If we decentralized schools and we didn't have every school having 2,000 kids in it, 100,000 kids, whatever it is, it might have been smaller and more manageable. And we would nobody would even thought to have an aid, but now that's what we have. So the question is who's going to be my child's aid? What kind of training do they have? Will they know that my child has a mood disorder? Do they understand it? Do they recognize that they should not enable? Do they understand what enabling means? How do I know they know that? Can I meet with the aide so I can develop a relationship? They're going to be very protective of their aides because they don't want you to know who the aide is really, because they move those people around. Sometimes, you know, and aides, I think aides tend to be the backbone of the school. They're unsung heroes because they are doing some really of the heavy lifting without the support, training, and or power to make a difference. And they are dancing as fast as they can. So if they're going to ask for an aid, understand why you're asking for it and for what purpose. And at certain times and ages, kids don't want the aid anymore. It's embarrassing. So how do you have an aid that can still help my kid and not really stigmatize them? And that's an art to that. And that aid can be a safe person, but it can't be the only safe person.
So we're running out of time, but I feel like I could just talk to you forever. Sort of wrapping up, I'm curious if you have sort of general suggestions as to how to start to build that relationship with the district that you're going to need. A lot of parents know going in like, oh, my kid is going to need something, and they're going into first grade in the fall, and what can I do to start the relationship that I'm going to need with the school?
Start with the teacher. You have to start with your teacher. I think teachers yield an enormous amount of power. They really do. The unfortunate thing, you have to have both, because you start with the teacher to say, hey, listen, you know, I don't know if you're aware of this, but Susie has an awful lot of anxiety. She has a little stuffed animal. She uses, I know it may not be appropriate for your classroom, so, you know, to have a doll out for her, but can we keep it in her backpack? And that's what I'm going to tell her where it is. And on occasion, can she go and, you know, with permission, go to the backpack and just take a look at it for a minute? It's going to help to self-soothe her until she learns how to cope, right? Until she learns how to cope with her fears. We're trying to use something to help distract her brain so that she can stay in the classroom. So I'd start with the teacher, and if it's escalating and it's not going anywhere, you might ask for a child study team member to take a look at them. Ask for advice from the counselor. Ask for support in a consultative way. Ask to speak to the counselor. I'm seeing that my child's come home and she's bit all her fingernails right off. What do you think that might mean? It's a very different thing than going and saying, you know, the teacher is going too fast and this, that, and the next thing. And if I could give anybody any tips about anything, my experience tells me that the reason why kids struggle in school so much is because they might cognitively be here and their processing speed is here, and their processing speed is affected by either medications, anxiety, stress, executive functioning deficits. So slowing down and giving kids think time is transformative. So that's what I would do. I would kind of go and start with the teacher, ask questions, ask to meet with the counselor, ask for suggestions, develop a relationship that's a rapport based, not like, you have to do this for my kid because I said so. It's just not going to happen. I mean, I would defer to you because you did very well with your district.
I did do very well with my district. And as I've said to you before, you know, I think that was because I knew my rights going in and they knew I knew my rights. And we were able to stay on task with what the ultimate goal was for my child. And I think that makes a difference, as you've said, not getting caught up in too many details, but really staying focused on the bigger picture of how does my child be successful in school, and how do we define success for my child, because it won't necessarily be the same for every child. You know, for one family, they may really want that child to be fully living up to their academic potential, whereas for another child, the family's goal may be true, you know, social integration and ability to function socially with their peers. And so knowing, I think having that clarity helps in developing that relationship, because you're working towards a common goal instead of at odds with one another.
Right. And again, I'd ask a lot more questions going in and gather as much information, because you're going to be making decisions based on stuff you don't know. You know, because you hear this much of it, good or bad, you know what I mean? They may be telling you that we're doing this and you don't even ask any questions. You say, okay, and it's not really good for your kid. So that's why I always tell them, be an informed consumer. Just like if you were buying a TV, you would do the research, right? You're thinking about getting a new app. How much research do you do on that, right? Do the same thing for education, and really ask around and find out what's conventional wisdom. What do you think about it? And look under the hood about what they're really trying to accomplish and why. And not all schools are equal. So what might work in one logistically may not work in the other. And you can keep hammering it and saying, I want it, I want it, I want it, but they'll never be able to do it. And they'll put in that IEP, and they will have that kid stand there for 30 minutes because you said they have to be in this lunchroom for 30 minutes. And all the kids left. All the kids left and went outside, but you said it's critical that he's staying in the lunchroom for 30 minutes. They'll follow it to the letter of the law, and you'll be like, no. So that's why you have to have some flexibility.
Well, yes. And I also wanted to just point out that a lot of our parents really, as focused as they are on their own children for obvious reasons, really do have the thought that they want the system itself to be improved, that their child shouldn't be the only one having to struggle through this. And I know that you have a remarkable program that addresses, you know, district-wide, school-wide implementation of a lot of the things that our children need. And I was hoping, just before we have to stop, if you could talk a little bit about that program, because I think it's something that parents can advocate for.
Sure. Well, you know, what became evident is that I did a lot of training for districts, and I would go out and do these one-hit wonders. And, you know, everybody wanted me to come out and do a presentation and a seminar on, you know, in-service day. Well, there's 3 in-service days a year, 2 in-service days a year. And how am I going to do all these different schools? Not to mention that logistically, to try to get 200 people in the room at the same time when they don't have space to hear a speaker come in to be consistently trained was impossible. So what we did was we went and we developed an online course for educators on how mental health manifests in the classroom from a kid's perspective, right? And we go over some of the most common mental health issues that you're going to see in schools, everything having to do with anxiety, high functioning autism, mood disorders, attention deficit disorder, and oppositional defiant disorders. So what we did is we broke these down into various models where we go over the disorder, what it is, how it can manifest in the classroom, what it looks like, and what are the strategies that you can actually use as a classroom teacher to help with this student. And it comes across as a way of really, it's hands-on. It's not some theoretical nonsense that you might read in a book that's been sitting on the shelf for 30 years. It's me talking just like this about the realities of the kid in front of you. Along with, there's a teacher tool, like a little toolbook, a toolkit that they can look at. That's a one-pager that helps them remember some of the common definitions, because they'll forget. Dysphoria, they think they know what they means. They think they know what OCD means, but they don't. They don't understand the compulsions versus the obsessional thinking. You know, there's things about it that they don't know, and the light bulb goes off for them when they really are taught, because a lot of them haven't had anything like this. So they don't know. And then there's a quiz. And we also, what I really like about this particular course that we developed is that it also asks them to be reflective. So part of it is I ask them, how does this make you feel? You may know you're dealing with a kid with a mood disorder when you feel like you're walking on eggshells. You know, put a kid in your mind that may have made you feel that way. And now that you know this, go back into your classroom and how you do things differently. And there's a whole structure on how I want schools to roll this out. So that's how we kind of work with school districts. And there's a little quiz and things like that. But the idea is we're going to teach them definitions so that they don't say your kid's so antsy, or, oh, nasty and cranky. We call that mood disorder. Or, boy, is he grandiose. He just thinks he's the best thing since sliced bread. He's having a moment of, you know, grandiosity. They need to be educated. And the truth of the matter is that they're not. They're just not. They didn't go to school for that. And counselors and teachers are in silos. They don't necessarily cross over. In our school they do, but not everywhere else. So there's a course online that people can take. And I think you'll share that with them if anybody's interested.
I will. There were a couple of things we didn't get to, but we're over our time, so maybe we can do this again. So thank you, Cindy, for being here. This was really wonderful and incredibly informative. Thank you for your time. We appreciate it.
Oh, sure thing. I appreciate being here. Honestly, it's a real honor to be able to talk to people from around the country about stuff that's really near and dear to me. I mean, this is my passion. I've been doing this for 20 plus years, and it's nice to have people come out and really want to know how to do better. We can do better. And I do think it's going to get better. I leave parents with a tremendous amount of hope. It's in the media. People are really talking about it. Now we have athletes who are coming out and saying, I'm not performing today because my mental health is not right. That is earth shattering. So I think you're in a good spot. I think there's going to be a bigger listening.